The corridor of IREX 9 station smelled of rust and desperation. Syra pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her shoulders, feeling the chill that never quite left the abandoned maintenance tunnels. The artificial lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced across the metal walls, a perfect metaphor for the dying space station itself. In her arms, little Neve whimpered softly. The child's feverish skin glowed with an unnatural blue tint, characteristic of her Theon heritage. Syra brushed back her daughter's silver-white hair, whispering words of comfort that felt increasingly hollow with each passing day. "Just a little longer, my star," she murmured, pressing her lips against Neve's burning forehead. "We'll find food soon." But Syra knew the truth. Their credits had run out 3 days ago, and the black market vendors were not known for their charity. The once bustling orbital station had been slowly decaying since the corporate pullout 5 years earlier, leaving behind only those too poor or too desperate to evacuate. The station's official systems operated at minimal capacity, while everything of value required payment, especially medical care. She shifted Neve's weight to her other arm and continued limping toward the makeshift marketplace that had sprung up in what was once the station's secondary maintenance bay. The smell of synthetic spices and old grease grew stronger as she approached, along with the low murmur of desperate commerce. Here, anything could be traded: information, parts, favors, bodies, but nothing came free. The vendor at the far end recognized her and frowned. "Nothing on credit," he called out before she even reached his stall. "Station policy, no exceptions." Syra reached into her pocket and pulled out her last possession of any value, a small pendant carved from Vasur stone, a reminder of her homeworld. "For food," she said quietly. "Enough for 2 days." The vendor examined the pendant with experienced eyes, then shook his head. "1 day's ration. Take it or leave it." She left with a single meal packet clutched in her hand, knowing it would have to last them both. The synthesized protein cubes were bland but nutritious, designed to keep a person alive, if not satisfied. Back in their corner of the abandoned medical wing, she activated the packet and watched it steam in the cold air. Neve stirred as the smell reached her. "Mama, food?" "Yes, my star. Food for you." Syra broke off a piece and blew on it gently before offering it to her daughter's parched lips. The child ate slowly, each bite clearly painful with her swollen throat. Syra watched, her own stomach twisting with hunger. When half the packet was gone, she set the rest aside for tomorrow, ignoring the emptiness that gnawed at her insides. She would survive without. She had to. From the shadows of a connecting corridor, Davin watched the small family with growing discomfort. He hadn't meant to spy, but the sight had frozen him in place, the mother giving every bite to her child despite her own obvious hunger. He shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of the warm container in his hands. Davin had once been someone important, chief executive of biological development at Velian Bionexus. Now he was just another refugee on this forgotten station, albeit one with slightly more resources than most. His company ID had been scrubbed clean, his background erased, but he still had access to certain systems that others didn't. It had kept him alive these past months as he ran from his past. He'd heard about the Theon refugees. Their distinctive appearance made them impossible to miss. Their home system had been devastated by a biological agent that had decimated their population. A biological agent that, if rumors were to be believed, had originated in labs not dissimilar to those he had once overseen. The soup in his container suddenly felt heavy in his hands. He had bought too much anyway, a rare luxury he could occasionally afford. Before he could reconsider, he stepped forward from the shadows. The woman's head snapped up, her posture instantly defensive as she pulled her child closer. "I have extra," Davin said simply, holding out the container. "Synthesized vegetable soup. It's still warm. Suspicion flashed across her features. Nothing is free on IREX 9. Consider it an exception to station policy. He set the container down and stepped back, giving her space. It's going to waste otherwise. He watched as conflict played across her face, pride warring with necessity. Finally, necessity won. With trembling hands, she reached for the container. "Thank you," she whispered, the words clearly unfamiliar on her tongue. Davin nodded once, then turned to leave. He didn't need gratitude, especially not from people whose suffering might well be traced back to companies like his former employer. "Wait!" she called after him. "Your name?" He hesitated. "Davin." "I'm Syra. This is Neve." She stroked her daughter's silver hair. "We won't forget this kindness." He didn't reply, just melted back into the shadows of the corridor. But something in her words followed him. Kindness. Was that what this was? Or just the barest minimum of decency? As he made his way back to his small quarters in the former crew section, Davin found himself thinking about the hollow-cheeked woman and her fever-stricken child. One meal wouldn't save them. In the harsh reality of IREX 9, they were just two more casualties waiting to happen. Yet, that night, sleep eluded him. The image of the woman sharing her meager food with her child played on repeat behind his closed eyelids. By morning, he had made a decision. Finding them again wasn't difficult. The abandoned medical wing had become home to several refugee families, clustered together for safety and warmth. Syra sat against the wall, her daughter curled in her lap, both asleep in the dim emergency lighting. This time, Davin brought more than soup, a package of protein bars, a thermal blanket still in its vacuum seal, and a small container of fever suppressant. Basic items, but precious in this environment. He approached quietly, but not silently. Startling a mother protecting her child was never wise. Syra's eyes snapped open, instantly alert with the wariness of someone accustomed to danger. Recognition dawned. "You again." "I brought a few things," he said, setting the items down between them. "The suppressant might help with her fever." Syra's eyes widened at the sight of the medication. Such items were tightly controlled, available only through the station's official medical facility, which charged exorbitant rates, or through black market channels at even higher prices. "Why?" The question was direct, her gaze unflinching. Davin shrugged, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "Because I can—" She reached for the fever suppressant first, examining the seal to ensure it was genuine. "These are restricted. You must have good connections." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. On IREX 9, connections meant survival. "Or you're running from something," she added softly, her eyes never leaving his face. Davin stiffened. "Aren't we all?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Fair point." She broke the seal on the medication and gently roused her daughter. "Neve, little star. Medicine for you." The child blinked awake, her luminous Thayan eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She obediently swallowed the liquid, making a face at the bitter taste. "Thank you," Syra said, and this time the words came more easily. "We've had a difficult journey." "From Theon Prime?" Davin asked, though he already knew the answer. She nodded, pulling the thermal blanket around her daughter's shoulders. "Our sector was one of the first hit. My husband—" She trailed off, pain flashing across her features. "He didn't make it. We were lucky to get on an evacuation ship." Lucky was a relative term, Davin thought, looking at their current surroundings. The abandoned medical wing was cold and sterile, emergency lighting casting everything in a sickly blue glow, water condensed on the metal walls, dripping rhythmically onto the floor. "And you ended up here," he said. "It was supposed to be temporary. A transit point to one of the inner colonies." Her fingers absently traced patterns on the thermal blanket. "But Neve got sick on the journey. By the time we arrived, they were implementing new quarantine protocols. No one with symptoms allowed through, especially not Theons. Davin nodded. He knew the protocols. He'd helped design similar ones in his previous life. So we wait, she continued, for her to get better, or for the protocols to change. The resignation in her voice made it clear which outcome she thought more likely. Davin looked at the child, who had already drifted back to sleep, the medication beginning to take effect. Her breathing seemed labored, her small chest rising and falling in an uneven rhythm. "What's wrong with her?" he asked. The doctors called it atmospheric adaptation syndrome. Her lungs are struggling with the recycled air. Syra's hand hovered protectively over her daughter's chest. On Theon, our air is different, more moisture, different composition. Children are especially sensitive during development. Davin frowned. That's treatable. Standard oxygen therapy and adaptive protocols should, Syra interrupted bitterly. If we had credits, if the medical facility would treat Theons without triple payment in advance, if, she shook her head. They said she needs a biological recalibration chamber. The waiting list for charity cases is months long. Biological recalibration. Davin knew the technology intimately. His company had pioneered its development. It was relatively simple medical tech. Certainly nothing that justified withholding it from a dying child. "I should go," he said abruptly, standing. "The suppressant will help for now. I'll come back." Syra looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Why are you helping us, Davin?" He hesitated, searching for an answer that made sense even to himself. "Because someone should," he finally said, and walked away. Over the next few days, Davin fell into a pattern. He would bring food, medicine, and occasionally small luxuries. A datapad loaded with children's stories, a softer blanket, a small light that projected stars onto the ceiling. Each time, Syra's suspicion faded a little more, though it never disappeared entirely. Survival on IREX 9 demanded constant vigilance. Neve's condition stabilized, but didn't improve. The fever suppressants kept the worst symptoms at bay, but her breathing remained labored, her energy minimal. She needed proper medical intervention, not just stopgap measures. On the 7th day, Davin arrived to find Syra alone, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "Where's Neve?" he asked, alarmed. "With another family down the corridor. I needed—" She trailed off, wiping roughly at her eyes. "I needed a moment." Davin set down his usual package of supplies and hesitated, unsure what to do with this vulnerability. Comfort had never been his strong suit. "She's getting worse," Syra said flatly. "The medication helps, but it's not enough. Her oxygen levels drop every night." Davin sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Have you tried the official channels again?" "I went to the medical facility yesterday. Begged them." Her laugh was hollow. "They said they could put her on the emergency list if I could provide collateral. A job contract, property deed, or biological patent rights." She looked at him with bitter amusement. As if refugees would have any of those things. Biological patent rights. The words struck Davin like a physical blow. How many times had he sat in boardrooms, arguing for the restriction of medical technologies based on patent protections? How many times had he justified placing profit margins above access to care? "I could go," he offered impulsively. "I might have better luck." Syra shook her head. "They don't care who asks, only who pays." They sat in silence for a long moment, the constant mechanical hum of the station filling the space between them. "I worked for Velian Bionexus," Davin said suddenly, the words escaping before he could reconsider. "Before?" Syra turned to look at him, her expression cautious. "The Biotech Corporation?" He nodded, studying the floor. "I was chief executive of biological development." The silence that followed was deafening. Velian was one of the corporate giants whose policies had shaped the current reality, including the restrictive medical protocols that were now threatening Neve's life. "I see," Syra said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm not anymore," he added, though the clarification felt woefully inadequate. "I left." "Why?" Davin took a deep breath. There was a project, a biological adaptation agent. It was supposed to help planets become more habitable, speed up terraforming. But there were concerns about cross-contamination, about how it might interact with existing ecosystems. Understanding dawned in Syra's eyes. "Theon." He couldn't hold her gaze. "I don't know for certain. The project was compartmentalized and I didn't ask the questions I should have. When rumors started about an incident, about contamination, the company denied everything. But I saw the internal reports." "And so you ran," she said. No judgment in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. "Yes." The admission felt like ripping open a wound. "I couldn't prove anything, couldn't stop what was already done. So I erased my tracks and disappeared. Ended up here." He waited for her anger, her accusations. They would be justified. Instead, Syra reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal container. From it, she produced 2 tea bags, real ones, not synthetic. "Theon herb tea," she explained, setting them on the small heating unit he'd brought days earlier. "My last luxury. I've been saving it." Davin watched in confusion as she prepared the tea, the fragrant steam rising between them. She handed him one of the cups, a chipped medical container repurposed as a mug. "In our culture, we share tea with those who have opened their hearts to us," she said simply. "Even when those hearts carry pain." The gesture struck him with unexpected force. Acceptance was the last thing he deserved, especially from her. "I was part of the system that's killing your daughter," he said, his voice rough. "And now you're trying to save her." Syra sipped her tea, her eyes holding his over the rim of her cup. "We are all more than our worst mistakes, Davin." He accepted the tea, the warmth seeping into his cold hands. The aroma was unlike anything he'd experienced, earthy and sweet, with an underlying spice that cleared his sinuses. "This is real tea," he said, surprised. "From actual plants." Syra nodded. "Grown in the central dome on Theon Prime. My mother cultivated tea gardens. It's incredible." The flavor was complex, nothing like the synthesized versions available on the station. "Home," she said simply. And in that single word, Davin heard all the loss she carried. They drank in companionable silence. The shared ritual, somehow more intimate than any conversation could have been. When they finished, Syra carefully rinsed the cups with a small amount of their rationed water and packed the tea container away. "I should check on Neve," she said, rising. "I'll come with you," Davin offered, gathering the supplies he'd brought. As they walked the short distance to where Neve was being watched, Syra suddenly spoke. "You asked why we share tea with those who open their hearts." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's because on Theon, we believe that when someone shows you their true self, especially the parts they're ashamed of, they're giving you a gift, their trust, and gifts must be acknowledged." Davin felt something shift within him at her words. How long had it been since anyone had seen him, truly seen him, and not turned away in disgust? Not even his own reflection in the mirror could manage that feat. They found Neve playing quietly with another child, a human boy perhaps a year older. Despite her illness, she beamed when she saw her mother, her luminous eyes brightening. "Mama, Davin!" She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. Davin knelt to her level, presenting the nutrient bar he'd brought specially for her, flavored to mimic fruit, a rarity on the station. "For you, little star." She accepted it with solemn gratitude, a miniature version of her mother's dignity. "Thank you." As they settled back into their corner of the medical wing, Neve nestled between them. Davin found himself thinking about recalibration chambers. The medical facility had several. He knew. He'd glimpsed them during his reconnaissance of the station. Most would be reserved for paying patients. But there was an older model in the back, likely used for training or emergencies. An idea began to form in his mind. Dangerous, possibly foolish, but potentially Neve's only chance. He waited until Neve was asleep, and Syra was distracted with organizing their meager belongings before broaching the subject. The recalibration chambers, he began carefully. They're isolated systems, self-contained. Syra looked up sharply. What about them? They don't require constant supervision. Once the protocols are initiated, the system runs automatically. He kept his voice casual, as if discussing a theoretical possibility rather than what was rapidly becoming a plan. Davin, her voice held warning. What are you thinking? The medical facility has security protocols. Yes. But they're designed to keep people out, not to monitor what happens inside once access is granted. He met her gaze steadily. I have experience with these systems. Realization dawned in her eyes. You're talking about breaking into the medical facility. Not breaking in. Accessing after hours. The distinction was meaningless, but it made the idea sound marginally less criminal. The chambers run on 3-hour cycles. If we could get Neve inside one, initiate the program, and get caught, imprisoned, or worse. Syra shook her head vehemently. They don't just confine rule breakers on IREX 9, Davin. They expel them, without suits. The punishment for major infractions on the station was ejection into space, a death sentence delivered with bureaucratic efficiency. It's a risk, he acknowledged. But I've been mapping the security rotations, the access points. There's a maintenance tunnel that connects directly to the back of the facility. The locks are old, predating the corporate systems. You've been planning this, she accused, though there was more surprise than anger in her voice. Davin shrugged. Considering possibilities, Neve needs treatment. Syra. Real treatment, not just suppressants and hope. She looked down at her sleeping daughter, conflict evident in every line of her body. If we're caught. We won't be, he assured her, with more confidence than he felt. I'll take the risk. You and Neve can wait in the tunnel. If something goes wrong, you'll have plausible deniability. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Plausible deniability doesn't exist for Theons on this station. She stroked Neve's hair, her decision already made despite her protests. When? Tomorrow night. The facility closes to non-emergency cases at 2200 hours. Security does a sweep at 2230, then not again until 100. Davin had spent days establishing the pattern, risking suspicion by lingering near the medical facility, under the guise of selling salvaged parts. And you're sure you can bypass the locks? Reasonably sure. He didn't mention that reasonably meant about 60% confident. Some details were better left unspoken. Syra nodded slowly. Tomorrow night, then. The following day passed with excruciating slowness. Davin gathered the tools he would need: a magnetic bypass for the older locks, a small electromagnetic pulse generator for the newer ones, and a basic slicing module he'd traded 3 weeks' worth of rations to acquire. None would work on high-security systems, but the medical facility on a dying station wasn't exactly a prime target for corporate espionage. Syra spent the day with Neve, reading stories from the datapad and playing quiet games that wouldn't tax her daughter's limited energy. To anyone watching, it appeared to be just another day in their precarious existence. But Davin noticed how Syra's eyes constantly tracked the time, how her shoulders tensed with each passing hour. When evening came, they prepared Neve as best they could. Syra explained that they were going on a special adventure to help her breathe better. The child's eyes widened with both excitement and apprehension. Will it hurt? She asked, her small voice trembling slightly. No, Little star, Syra assured her. It will be like taking a special bath. You might feel a tingling sensation, but it won't hurt. Davin packed a small bag with essentials, water, emergency rations, a change of clothes for Neve. The recalibration process could be disorienting, and they would need to move quickly afterward. At 2145 hours, they slipped out of the medical wing and into the maze of maintenance tunnels that crisscrossed the station. Davin led the way, Syra carrying Neve, wrapped in the thermal blanket. The child was unnaturally quiet, sensing the gravity of their mission. The maintenance tunnel that connected to the medical facility was narrow and poorly lit, designed for service drones rather than human access. They crawled through in single file, the metal cold against their hands and knees. Neve's breathing grew more labored in the confined space, each wheezing intake echoing alarmingly. "We're almost there," Davin whispered back to them. "Just a little further." Finally, they reached the access panel that would lead them into the rear of the medical facility. Davin checked his timepiece. 22:17 hours. Right on schedule. "Wait here," he instructed, pulling out his tools. "I'll check the lock and the area beyond. If it's clear, I'll come back for you." Syra nodded, holding Neve close. "Be careful." The lock was older than he'd hoped, but not impossible. The magnetic bypass attached easily to the control panel, cycling through potential security codes. After an agonizing 2 minutes, the lock disengaged with a soft click. Davin eased the panel open, just enough to peer through. Beyond was a dimly lit storage area, filled with medical supplies and decommissioned equipment. Perfect. He slipped back to where Syra waited with Neve. "It's clear. Storage room. Looks unused. The recalibration chambers should be just beyond." Syra nodded and shifted Neve in her arms. "Lead the way." The three of them moved silently into the storage room, Davin carefully securing the panel behind them. The air here was noticeably different, cleaner, with the faint, antiseptic smell common to medical facilities throughout the galaxy. Neve lifted her head, taking a deeper breath than she had been able to manage in days. "It smells nice," she whispered. Davin put a finger to his lips, smiling at her. "Very nice," he agreed softly. "Now we need to be very quiet, like space mice." The child nodded solemnly, mimicking his gesture with her own small finger against her lips. They navigated through the storage room, past shelves of supplies that would have been worth a fortune in the refugee section. Davin fought the urge to fill his pockets. Their mission was risky enough without adding theft to the charges they would face if caught. At the door to the main facility, he paused, checking his timepiece again. 22:25 hours. The security sweep would begin soon. "We need to wait," he whispered to Syra. 5 minutes. She nodded, finding a sheltered spot between storage units where they could observe the door without being immediately visible to anyone entering. The minutes crept by with excruciating slowness. Neve began to fidget, uncomfortable and tired. Syra distracted her with silent finger games, tracing patterns on the child's palm that made her smile despite her discomfort. At precisely 22:30, the door slid open. A security officer entered, her uniform bearing the insignia of IREX 9's corporate management. She performed a cursory check of the main area, barely glancing toward the storage section before marking something on her datapad and exiting the way she had come. Davin released the breath he'd been holding. "Now we move. Quickly." The main treatment area was dark, illuminated only by the emergency lighting and the soft glow of equipment in standby mode. Davin oriented himself, scanning for the recalibration chambers he knew should be present. There, along the far wall, 3 chambers, their transparent tops closed, control panels dark. He approached cautiously, examining the nearest one. It was an older model, as he'd suspected, but fully functional according to the status indicators. "This one," he decided, activating the control panel with a careful press of his finger. The system came to life, requesting authentication. This was the tricky part. He connected his slicing module, hoping the security was as outdated as the hardware. Lines of code scrolled across the small screen of his device. After a tense moment, the authentication screen on the chamber changed, displaying the treatment protocol options. "It worked," he breathed, relief flooding through him. Sierra approached with Neve, her eyes wide as she took in the chamber. "Are you sure this is safe?" "The chamber itself is safe," Davin assured her, selecting the appropriate protocol for respiratory adaptation. "It's being here that's dangerous." He completed the setup, configuring the system for Theon physiology, thankfully still in the database, and a child's parameters. The chamber would create a customized atmosphere, gradually adapting Neve's lungs to the station's air while strengthening her respiratory system. "It's ready," he said, turning to Syra. "The cycle will take 3 hours. We can't stay here that long. Too risky. I've programmed it to alert my personal communicator when it's complete." Syra hesitated, clutching Neve tighter. "You want us to leave her here, alone?" "It's the safest option," Davin insisted gently. "The chamber is completely secure once sealed. No one can interrupt the process without administrative access, which would trigger alarms anyway. And if someone comes in, they won't see her immediately. The chambers are designed for privacy. The exterior goes opaque once the cycle begins." He gestured to the settings he'd configured. "See? I've set it to mimic a maintenance cycle. Even if someone checks, it will look like routine upkeep." Sierra still looked uncertain, but Neve was struggling to breathe now, the excitement and stress taking their toll on her fragile system. "We need to decide quickly," Davin pressed, checking the time again. "We have a window now, but I can't guarantee when the next patrol might come through." "Finally," Syra nodded. "Explain it to her. She needs to understand." Davin knelt to Neve's level, meeting her luminous eyes. "Neve, this special bath will help your breathing. You'll lie down inside, and the top will close. It might feel strange, but it won't hurt. There will be a mist that smells sweet, and you might feel sleepy. That's normal. When it's all done, we'll come back for you. But you have to be very brave and stay very still." The child looked from Davin to her mother, seeking reassurance. Syra forced a smile. "It's all right, my star. This will make you better." Neve nodded solemnly. "I'll be brave, Mama." With gentle hands, Syra helped Neve into the chamber, arranging her comfortably on the padded surface. Davin handed the child a small communicator. "If you get scared, press this button," he instructed, showing her the emergency call function. "But only if you're really scared, okay? It's just for emergencies." "Okay," Neve agreed, clutching the device. Sierra bent to kiss her daughter's forehead. "I love you, my little star. We'll be back before you know it." Davin initiated the sequence, and the chamber's transparent top began to lower. Neve remained brave, though her eyes widened as the seal engaged with a soft hiss. A gentle mist began to fill the chamber, and within moments, her eyelids were drooping, the sedative component taking effect. "She's asleep," Davin said softly. "The first phase is sedation to prevent stress during the adaptation." Syra watched as the exterior of the chamber gradually turned opaque, hiding her daughter from view. The control panel showed stable life signs: heartbeat, respiration, oxygen levels. 3 hours, she repeated, tearing her gaze away. Not a minute longer. They retraced their steps carefully, returning to the storage room and through the maintenance tunnel, instead of returning to the refugee section. However, Davin led them to a small observation deck, rarely used by station personnel. From here, they could see the stars through a reinforced viewport, the endless expanse of space stretching before them. "It's safer to wait here," he explained. "Less chance of someone noticing our absence and asking questions." Sierra nodded, sinking down onto a bench that had once served visitors to the observation deck in better days. She looked exhausted, the constant strain of caring for Neve etched into every line of her face. "She'll be all right," Davin said, sitting beside her. "The treatment has a 97% success rate for cases like hers." "And the other 3%? He hesitated. "Complications are rare, especially with the chamber I selected. It's older, but actually better for delicate adjustments." Syra didn't look convinced. "What made you leave?" she asked suddenly. "Velian, you said you saw reports, but what exactly made you run?" The question caught him off guard. I realized I'd been lying to myself, pretending that what we did was all for the greater good. Progress, innovation, advancement of science." His laugh was hollow. "Corporate buzzwords to justify putting profit over people." "Was there a specific moment?" Davin stared out at the stars, remembering. "There was a meeting. After the first reports came in about the contamination on Theon, the board was discussing containment, not of the biological agent, but of the information. Someone suggested that the affected populations should be allowed to run their course, to avoid admitting liability." He could still see their faces around the polished conference table, discussing genocide as casually as quarterly projections. "I walked out of that meeting and never went back. Emptied my accounts, erased my digital footprint, and disappeared." He shook his head. "Not exactly heroic." "You didn't agree to their plan," Syra pointed out. "I didn't stop it either." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Syra was quiet for a long moment. "My husband was a biological researcher," she finally said. "He was working on adaptive respiratory systems for off-world colonies. When people started getting sick, he volunteered to analyze the contaminant." Her voice grew distant, lost in memory. "He knew almost immediately that it wasn't natural. The protein structures were too perfect, too designed. He was trying to create an antidote when he became infected himself." Davin felt sick. How many others like her husband had died while Valian executives discussed containment strategies? "I'm sorry," he said, the words painfully inadequate. Syra nodded, acknowledging his apology without absolving him. "Neve was already showing symptoms when we evacuated. The medical team on the transport ship did what they could. But," she trailed off. "Here we are." "Here we are," Davin echoed softly. They sat in silence for a time, watching the stars. Despite everything, there was a strange peace in the moment. Two people bound by circumstance, sharing the weight of their respective burdens. "What will you do?" Davin asked eventually. "If the treatment works?" Syra considered the question. "Try again for one of the inner colonies. I suppose. Some have Theon communities now. Refugees like us, who managed to get through before the restrictions tightened." "Do you have family there?" She shook her head. "Most of my family was in our sector. Those who survived scattered throughout the evacuation ships." Her fingers absently traced the outline of the Vasur pendant in her pocket. "But Theons find each other. We always have." Davin nodded, thinking. "There's a transport leaving for Selva 9 in 3 days. Cargo ship. But they take passengers if you have the right connections." Syra raised an eyebrow. "And you have these connections?" "I might." He'd been saving for passage himself, accumulating credits through various odd jobs and occasional slicing work. Selva 9 has a hydroponic system similar to Theon's central dome. The air quality is better than most colonies. "Sounds expensive." Davin shrugged. "Worth it for a fresh start." The conversation lapsed again into comfortable silence. Davin checked his communicator regularly, monitoring Neve's treatment progress. Everything remained steady, the chamber functioning exactly as programmed. As the 3-hour mark approached, tension returned. They made their way back through the maintenance tunnels, timing their approach to avoid the 0100 security sweep. The storage room was still empty, the medical facility quiet, save for the soft hum of equipment. Davin checked the chamber's control panel. The cycle was complete, all indicators showing successful treatment. He initiated the opening sequence, and the opaque exterior gradually became transparent again, revealing Neve, still sleeping peacefully inside. Syra rushed forward as the top lifted, gathering her daughter into her arms. "Neve, little star?" The child stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Mama?" Her voice was clearer than it had been in weeks, the wheeze noticeably absent. Davin quickly checked her vital signs on the monitor. Oxygen levels at 98%. Respiratory function stabilized. He couldn't hide his relief. It worked. Neve blinked up at him, then broke into a wide smile. "I feel better," she announced, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "Yes, you do," Syra agreed, tears streaming unchecked down her face. "You're much better now." Davin erased all traces of their use from the system, returning the chamber to standby mode. "We need to move quickly," he reminded them, though he couldn't help but smile at Neve's transformation. They made their way back through the maintenance tunnel, Neve walking on her own for the first time in days. Her steps were wobbly but determined, her face bright with renewed energy. Back in the safety of the abandoned medical wing, Syra put Neve to bed in their makeshift home. The child fell asleep almost immediately, her breathing deep and even. "Thank you," Syra said, turning to Davin. "I don't know how to—" He shook his head, cutting her off. "Don't. Please." He couldn't bear gratitude, not when his former company had likely caused Neve's condition in the first place. "I'm glad it worked." Syra studied him for a moment, then reached into her pocket and withdrew the Vasor pendant. "This was my mother's," she said, holding it out to him. "In our culture, when someone saves a life, they become family." Davin stared at the pendant, understanding the significance of what she offered. "I can't accept that. It's your last piece of home." "Home isn't a place, Davin. It's people." She pressed the pendant into his hand, closing his fingers around it. "You're family now, whether you want to be or not." The weight of the stone in his palm felt both heavier and lighter than he'd expected. He'd spent months running from connections, from responsibility, from his own past. Yet here was this woman, offering him a place in her family despite knowing exactly who he had been. "I meant what I said about Selva 9, he said finally, carefully placing the pendant in his own pocket. "I have enough credits for 3 passages." Syra's eyes widened. "3, but—" "Family," he said simply, echoing her words back to her. "If you'll have me." The plan came together quickly over the next 2 days. Davin contacted his connection on the cargo ship, a former engineer who owed him a favor for some creative slicing that had kept him out of corporate detention. 3 passages were arranged, hidden among the manifests as maintenance personnel transfers. Neve grew stronger by the hour, her natural Theon resilience reasserting itself now that her lungs could properly process oxygen. She followed Davin around their small living space, asking endless questions about the ship that would take them to their new home. "Will it have windows? Can I see the stars? How fast does it go? Will there be other children?" He answered each query patiently, marveling at the transformation from the listless, fever-stricken child he had first encountered. Her luminous eyes now shone with genuine light, rather than the dull glow of illness. Syra prepared for departure with methodical efficiency, packing their few possessions and trading unnecessary items for supplies they would need for the journey. Her movements were lighter now, the crushing weight of constant worry partially lifted from her shoulders. The night before their departure, as Neve slept soundly nearby, Syra and Davin shared another cup of Theon tea, the very last of her supply. "We'll find more on Selva 9, she assured him, seeing his hesitation to accept such a precious commodity. "They have trade connections with Theon outposts." "What will you do there?" he asked, sipping the fragrant brew. Sira considered the question. Start again. My husband's research might still be useful. I have his notes, his data. She glanced at the small data crystal she wore on a chain around her neck. Perhaps I can continue what he began. Finding an antidote? She nodded. Or at least a better treatment. There are thousands of Theons still suffering from respiratory damage. Her gaze drifted to Neve's sleeping form. Not everyone has access to a recalibration chamber. Or someone willing to break into one, Davin added with a wry smile. Or that, she agreed, returning his smile. What about you? What will you do on Selva 9? It was a question he'd been asking himself since proposing the plan. What place could there be for a former corporate executive with blood on his hands? I don't know, he admitted. Start over, I suppose. Use what I know to help rather than harm. Syra nodded, understanding in her eyes. A good beginning. The following day, they made their way to Dock 17 where the cargo ship awaited. They traveled light, carrying only what they could fit in small packs. Neve insisted on walking the entire way, though Davin could see she was tiring by the time they reached the dock. Without a word, he lifted her onto his shoulders, earning a delighted giggle. Now you can see everything, he told her, securing her small legs with careful hands. The dock was busier than the refugee section, filled with workers loading cargo and running pre-flight checks. No one paid much attention to 3 more passengers among the controlled chaos. Davin's contact met them at the ship's secondary entrance, a maintenance hatch not monitored by station security. The man raised an eyebrow at the sight of them, particularly Syra and Neve with their distinctive Theon features, but asked no questions. Maintenance quarters, 3rd level, he instructed, handing Davin 3 ID badges with carefully crafted false identities. Stay there until we break orbit. After that, you can move around the crew areas, but stay clear of the bridge and official cargo bays. Davin nodded, passing him the agreed-upon payment, the last of his accumulated credits, plus a small data chip containing a security bypass for corporate tracking systems. The man pocketed both without comment. Departure in 30 minutes, he said, by way of farewell, disappearing back into the bustle of the dock. The maintenance quarters were small but clean, with 3 narrow bunks and a tiny washing facility. Compared to their corner of the abandoned medical wing, it was luxurious. Neve immediately claimed the top bunk, climbing the ladder with newfound energy. I can see the whole room from here. Sira smiled up at her daughter. Just be careful, little star. We don't want you falling. As the departure time approached, they felt the rumble of engines coming to life beneath them. Neve's eyes widened with excitement and a touch of apprehension. It's loud, she observed, climbing down to sit between Syra and Davin on the lower bunk. Just for a little while, Davin assured her. Once we're in space, it will be quieter. The ship shuddered as it disengaged from the docking clamps. Through the small porthole, they could see Irex 9 station beginning to recede, its dilapidated structure somehow less imposing from a distance. Sira took a deep breath. I never thought we'd leave, she admitted quietly. I was preparing myself for... She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Davin had seen enough on the station to know what happened to refugees whose credits ran out. But we did leave, he reminded her gently. And we're not going back. The journey to Selva 9 took 12 days, longer than a passenger vessel would have required. But the cargo ship made several stops along the way. They spent most of their time in the maintenance quarters, venturing out only during the quiet shift cycles, when fewer crew members were about. Neve bloomed during the journey, with clean, recycled air and proper nutrition from the crew's mess hall. Her strength returned fully. Her natural curiosity made her a favorite among the maintenance staff, who taught her simple engineering games and let her help with minor tasks. Syra used the time to organize her husband's research data, preparing to present it to the scientific community on Selva 9. There were research facilities there, smaller than the corporate giants but more ethically focused. Davin found himself contemplating futures he had never considered before. His expertise in biological systems could be valuable in the right context, used to heal rather than exploit. Perhaps there was a place for him in the research Sierra hoped to continue. They approached Selva 9 on the morning of the 13th day. Unlike Irex 9's industrial starkness, Selva 9 was a vision of green and blue even from orbit. The colony had been established around a massive biodome, designed to replicate Earth's most lush ecosystems while accommodating various off-world species. Their entry was smoother than expected. Davin's falsified IDs passed inspection, and the Theon refugee status that had been a barrier on Irex 9 was welcomed on Selva 9, where environmental engineers valued the Theon's innate understanding of complex ecosystems. They found temporary housing in the colony's outer ring, a small apartment with actual windows overlooking one of the agricultural domes. For the first time in months, they ate fresh food, breathed clean air, and slept without fear. A week after their arrival, Syra was offered a position at the colony's research facility. Her husband's data on the contaminant had proven valuable, providing new insights into counteracting its effects. "They want you too," she told Davin one evening, as they sat watching Neve play in the community garden below their window. "Your expertise in biological recalibration systems would be invaluable for developing treatments." Davin stared at her in disbelief. "You told them about me? About Velian?" She nodded. "Not everything. Just that you had worked in the field and were seeking a fresh start." She touched his arm gently. "Your knowledge could help save lives, Davin. Isn't that what you want?" It was more than anything. He wanted to balance the scales, somehow, to use what he knew to heal rather than harm. But doubt still gnawed at him. "I'm not sure I deserve that chance," he admitted. Sierra considered his words carefully. "My husband used to say that knowledge itself isn't good or evil. It's what we choose to do with it that matters." She smiled sadly. He believed in second chances. Davin fingered the Vasseur pendant he still carried in his pocket. Family, she had called him, a concept so foreign after years of corporate isolation that he hardly knew what to do with it. "I'll think about it," he promised. The facility was smaller than he'd expected, housed in a secondary dome adjacent to the main colony. What it lacked in corporate opulence, it made up for in purpose. Every research project was focused on healing, on restoration, on making the galaxy more habitable for all species. Dr. Eliana Reyes, the facility director, met him personally, her keen eyes assessing him with scientific precision. "Syra speaks highly of your abilities," she said, leading him through the various laboratories. "We're particularly interested in your experience with recalibration technology." Davin nodded, noting the simplified equipment they were using, functional, but lacking the refinements he was accustomed to. "You're adapting standard systems for Theon physiology?" "Trying to," Dr. Reyes confirmed. "With limited success. The respiratory damage caused by the Theon contaminant has unique characteristics we're still struggling to understand." They stopped at a viewing window overlooking a small ward. Inside, several Theon patients sat or lay in beds, their breathing supported by various devices. Davin recognized the symptoms immediately. The same labored breathing, the same dull glow to their normally luminous eyes. "How many survived?" he asked quietly. "Approximately 63% of the exposed population," Dr. Reyes replied. "Of those, almost half suffer from chronic respiratory damage. The recalibration treatments help, but they're not a cure." Not a cure. The words echoed in Davin's mind as he stared at the patients. Neve had been lucky, young enough for her system to adapt fully with proper treatment. These adults might never recover completely. "I'd like to see your current protocols," he said suddenly. "If you're willing to share them." Dr. Reyes smiled. "That's why you're here." Davin began work the following day. joining a team focused specifically on adapting recalibration technology for Theon physiology. His corporate experience proved more valuable than he had anticipated, not for the profit-driven mindset, but for the technical knowledge and problem-solving skills he had developed. Syra worked in a neighboring laboratory, analyzing her husband's data and developing new approaches to counteracting the contaminant. They often met for lunch in the facility's small cafeteria, comparing notes and brainstorming ideas. Niamh thrived in the colony's education center, making friends with both human and Theon children. Her experience with illness had left her with a surprising empathy for others, and she often volunteered to help the colony's medical staff with simple tasks. Months passed, and gradually Davin found himself settling into a life he had never imagined. The weight of his past remained, but it no longer defined him entirely. Here, in this small colony, at the edge of explored space, he had found purpose. One evening, nearly a year after their arrival on Selva 9, Davin returned to the apartment to find Syra and Niamh waiting with a small cake made from real ingredients. A luxury even on this abundant colony. "What's the occasion?" he asked, setting down his work materials. Niamh bounced excitedly. "We did it! Mom and you did it!" Syra smiled, her luminous eyes bright with joy. The new treatment protocol was approved today. The trials were successful. 78% improvement rate in chronic cases. Davin stared at her in disbelief. They had been working on the protocol for months, combining his knowledge of recalibration systems with her husband's research on the contaminant. The results had been promising, but approval had seemed distant. "That's incredible," he managed, the full impact washing over him. "How many patients can be treated?" "All of them, eventually," Syra said, cutting the cake into precise pieces. "The production facilities are already being prepared. Dr. Reyes says distribution will begin within weeks." Niamh handed him a slice of cake with solemn ceremony. "You fixed what was broken," she said, her child's wisdom cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Not completely, Davin thought. Nothing could bring back those who had been lost. Nothing could erase the decisions that had led to the contamination in the first place. But perhaps this was a start, a balancing of scales, a redirection of knowledge toward healing. Later that night, as Niamh slept and the colony's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights in their sector, Syra joined Davin on the small balcony overlooking the agricultural dome. Below them, rows of plants stretched in orderly patterns, their growth monitored by gentle artificial light. "I have something for you," Syra said, holding out a small package wrapped in simple cloth. Davin accepted it curiously. Inside was a container of tea, real Theon tea, its distinctive aroma immediately recognizable. "From the new gardens," Syra explained. "The first harvest. I thought we should share it, as we did before." As she prepared the tea using the proper Theon method, so different from their improvised approach on IREX 9, Davin found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate encounter in a station corridor to partners in healing, their paths had merged in ways neither could have predicted. Syra handed him a cup of the steaming tea. "To new beginnings," she said softly. "And to remembering," Davin added, thinking of all those who had not been as fortunate as they were. They drank in companionable silence, watching the gentle movement of plants below. Not everything broken could be fixed. Davin knew. Some damage was permanent, some losses irreplaceable. But here, in this moment, there was peace in the knowledge that they had done what they could to heal what was within their reach. And perhaps in the end, that was enough. In the soft, artificial twilight of Selva 9, with the scent of Theon tea mingling with the colony's carefully regulated air, Davin felt something he had not experienced in years: hope. Not the desperate hope of survival that had driven him on IREX 9, but a quieter, more sustainable hope. The hope of continuing, of building, of making amends through action rather than regret. Beside him, Syra watched the agricultural dome with eyes that still held the memory of loss, but no longer seemed consumed by it. Between them, invisible but tangible, was the connection that had begun with a simple act of sharing. A bowl of soup offered without expectation. A life saved through collective courage. Family, she had called him. And here, among the stars, they had found their way home.